Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. With the election coming up tomorrow, things are really tightening up, and there's a lot of prediction and prognosticating going on last minute. As a matter of fact, we have this from Larry J. Sabato over at the Crystal Ball. It's a pretty long, lengthy article, so I'll just read a couple of paragraphs in the highlights. Final ratings for the 2020 election, Sabato's Crystal Ball. Key points are final electoral college ratings show Joe Biden has 321 electoral votes and Donald Trump at 217. Democrats are narrow favorites to win a Senate majority, 50 to 48 with two toss-ups. The two Georgia races, both of which we think are likely to go to runoffs. We have Democrats netting 10 seats in the House. The only governorship we have flipping is Montana, which could be a gain for Republicans. The table shows Florida, Iowa, Maine 2, and Ohio leaning Republican, with Georgia and North Carolina leaning Democrat in the Electoral College. Senate rating change, we have Johnny Ernst seat going from leans Democrat to leans Republican. Tom Tillis's North Carolina seat, toss-up to leans Democrat. John Cornyn seat in Texas, likely Republican to leans Republican. And the Crystal Ball House rating changes has Schweikert, Arizona 6 seat, going from toss-up to leans Democrat. TJ Cox, Democrat 21st District, toss-up leans Democrat. Debbie McCassell Powell, Democrat Florida 26, toss-up to leans Democrat. The only ones that and so on. There's a lot there. Here's the final Crystal Ball Electoral College ratings. As you can see, they're predicting Trump's blue wall, which he won last time, of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, all flipping back to Biden. Georgia and North Carolina flipping to Biden. And yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Goes on to say our final ratings. Is it possible that Donald Trump will win a second term as president? Yes. Do the data point to that happening? No. As we survey the political landscape a day before the election, we see a race that has largely been steady. Even before he was a Democrat nominee, Joe Biden seemed like the strongest potential challenger to Donald Trump. Perhaps they said more about the Democrat field than Biden himself, and he is hardly an inspiring candidate. But the former vice president has been able to bring together the Democrat Party's warring factions, at least for now, and keep the focus of the election on the sitting president. The worldwide pandemic challenged Trump's mettle, and he is in a considerably weaker position because of it. And there it says that they've looked through indicators that the president was catching up, and both their Republican and Democrat sources generally see Biden as a strong favorite to surpass the requisite 270 electoral votes to win. And throughout much of November, they had 290 votes at least leaning to Joe Biden. That includes all the states that voted for Hillary Clinton, of 232 electoral votes, plus Trump won Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, in addition to a single electoral vote in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. In the end, we did not see a reason to shift any of these electoral states back to Trump. Pennsylvania is probably the state we feel the shakiest about. If Trump were to win the state, we suspect it would be because of bigger margins in the state's white rural and small town areas, with a weaker than expected Democrat margin in Philadelphia. While some projections of Trump winning 20 or even 30% of the black vote are very unrealistic, he may do a little bit better than 2016 among non-white voters in aggregate. Note though that if Biden can win the Clinton states plus Arizona, Michigan, Nebraska 2, and Wisconsin, he could afford to lose Pennsylvania, but that would be an agonizingly close election. If Biden does carry these 290 electoral votes and only these, he would be fine to win, but his victory might be in doubt tomorrow evening. That's because the vote counts in some of these states, most notably Pennsylvania, could take a while to complete. And it says that, and it goes on to say, Team Trump beware of the crystal ball's kiss of death in Florida. We have to admit that our record in Florida is poor. We have erred in the state 4 cycles in a row, missing the 2012-2016 presidential races and the 2014 gubernatorial and 2018 gubernatorial Senate races. Such is the peril of trying to divine a state that is so perennially close. All of the aforementioned races were decided by roughly a point each time. If we could have come up with an excuse to kick you for it as a toss-up, we would have, but we traditionally call each state, so we can't present a complete electoral college projection. And they go on to talk about the Senate and the House as well as the governor's races. Concluding with, this is the 72nd issue of the Crystal Ball this year, the most issues we have ever published in a single year, and the year is not over. At the very least, we can guarantee that readers have gotten their money's worth, especially since the University of Virginia Center for Politics, as a public service, does not charge anyone for the crystal ball. Whatever happens, we'll be back after the election to start wading through the results and looking ahead to what's next. And yeah, Larry D. Sabato's good people. I'm kind of leery on that. As a matter of fact, I have my own little prediction as to what I think will happen, and I'll post the link in the description below it with all of these articles as well. And now people are saying, you know, what's this 270? What's this 270 brouhaha about? Well, the Associated Press has come up with a very interesting article on that. Expanding what's 270, the math game behind the US election. What's all this hubbub about 270? It's not about the 270 whales standing this fall on Australia's island state of Tasmania. It's not about congestion on Interstate 270 feeding commuters into Washington, D.C. It's about who's going to sit in the White House for the next 4 years. It's the Electoral College. Nearly 2.9 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election, but she still lost. President Donald Trump won because he took the Electoral College under a system set up in the U.S. Constitution and refined through the centuries. This is where the magic number comes into play. To win the White House, a candidate must win at least 270 electoral votes. That's a majority of the 538 that are up for grabs in the 50 states. And the numbers, each state is allotted a different number of electoral votes based on how many representatives it has in the House, plus its 2 senators. California has the most electoral votes with 55. Texas is next with 38 electoral votes. The candidate who wins New York or Florida can pocket 29 electoral votes toward the race to get 270. Illinois and Pennsylvania each have 20. Rounding out the top 10 list of states with the most electoral votes is Ohio with 18, Georgia and Michigan with 16, and North Carolina with 15. Trump has several paths to 270, but his best road hinges on winning Florida and Pennsylvania. If he wins both those states and holds on to North Carolina and Arizona, which he nearly carried in 2016, and also Georgia and Ohio, which he won in 2016, but is now competitive, he will win. With 29 electoral votes, Florida is arguably the most crucial state for Trump. A loss there would make it nearly impossible to retain the White House. What Biden needs, Democrat Joe Biden's campaign is laser focused on the states in the Midwest and those by that Trump flipped in 2016, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. He's also making a big play for Arizona, a state that hasn't backed a Democrat presidential candidate since 1996. Biden is also redoubling his focus on Florida, the biggest prize among the perennial battlegrounds, and a state which would virtually block Trump's re-election if it swings Democrat. There are a couple of videos from PragerU, Tara Evans, I think her name is, had done a couple of them explaining just why we have the Electoral College. I think it's very beneficial myself, because you can lose a popular vote, yet at the same time win the Electoral College. And, just ask Trump in 2016, who was the most recent, when Hillary Clinton, as was said in one of the articles, won 2.9 million more votes than Trump, yet it was the Electoral College that put Trump over the top. And with this being a very unique election season, we have 8 events that shape the 2020 elections. This from roll call. We're down to the final 2 days to vote in the 2020 election after a campaign season that often felt like one of the longest in living history. Here are the 8 events that shaped this year's races. The inauguration of President Donald J. Trump. Yes, one of the most defining moments of 2020 happened nearly 4 years ago. In 2016, many Democrats took the race for granted and presumed there was no way Trump would ever get elected President of the United States. But the day after he set foot in the Oval Office, a National Mall was the scene of the massive Women's March, and Democrat voters and donors began an urgent and sustained push to make sure Trump didn't get a second term. Joe Biden wins the Democrat nomination for president. If Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders had been the Democrat nominee, Trump and the Republicans would have easily framed the election as a choice between socialism and capitalism. Trump's nomination, or Biden's nomination rather, severely blunted that argument, since people had already lived through 8 years of him being a heartbeat away from the top job, and it kept the frame of the election on Trump's behavior and record in office. Representative James E. Clyburn's endorsement and role in helping Biden win the South Carolina Democrat primary is a related pivotal moment, along with Sanders' early exit and the quick consolidation around the former vice president. Number 3, anyone that wants a test can get a test. The president's words on March 6th came to symbolize his overall approach to the coronavirus. For months, Trump has demonstrated either a lack of understanding of the scope of the pandemic or an unwillingness to address COVID-19 in a serious and consistent way. That mentality had dramatic ramifications for the economy and thus the president's re-election chances. Without a strong economy, voters were left to judge Trump on other issues less favorable to him. The president has simply ramped up testing and encouraged everyone to wear a mask. There's a good chance the economy, the country, and Trump's re-election chances would all be in a healthier position. Steve Bullock runs for Senate. The Democrat governor's decision in March to challenge GOP Senator Steve Daines in Montana expanded the Senate battlefield by turning a race that was considered solidly in the Republican column into a competitive one that would require money and attention. With Montana in play, the Democrats had more than one path to retaking the Senate. Now with Trump struggling to match his 2016 performances in states around the country, Democrats have even more options, but Bullock's entry was a legitimate game changer. In an otherwise stable race, the president lost some ground after his June decision to forcibly remove protesters from Lafayette Square across from the White House to pave the way for a photo op in front of St. John's Church. Maybe more importantly, the moment was evidence that Trump's emphasis on law and order wasn't a clear-cut winning issue for him, even though it would be a constant part of his repertoire for the duration of the race. The president's unwillingness to acknowledge the generational struggles of the Black community limited his ability to attract a larger share of voters of color, and his tactics looked tone deaf to moderate voters. The president tests positive for COVID-19. While it shouldn't have been a complete surprise, Trump testing positive and being hospitalized for the coronavirus was a breathtaking news event. Not only did it overshadow one of his legacy moments, the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, it kept the attention on the coronavirus, an issue a majority of Americans trust Biden to handle better than the president. And without a second debate, Trump missed a primetime opportunity to change the trajectory of the race. Washington Post op-ed by National Security Democrats. In September 2019, 7 freshman Democrats declared in a Washington Post opinion piece that what Trump was reported to have said to the president of Ukraine was a threat to all we have sworn to protect, and urged their colleagues to start an impeachment inquiry for the 7 represented districts Trump carried in 2016. So the declaration showed how much the president's electoral strength had waned, and the Democrats were unafraid to oppose him. More than a year later, Trump might not carry any of the 7 districts. The first presidential debate. Just by staying upright and coherent, Biden cleared a very low bar set by Republicans in the preceding months when they questioned his mental state. Down in the polls, Trump came to the Cleveland stage with the right strategy, trying to hold Biden accountable for the sins of the Obama administration and his son Hunter, but he executed it in the wrong way. In the words of conservative CNN commentator Scott Jennings, the president went from being on-offensive to being offensive. With his actions, Trump made himself the focal point, and as long as the election's referendum on the unpopular and polarizing candidate or incumbent, the less likely Trump is to win. Now, this race is definitely going to be, or is definitely rather interesting. So far, there's a lot of early voting, so we'll find out just what'll come of that tomorrow. And every election has an October surprise. The American Thinker already has the October surprise, saying the race is over. We now know, thanks to October, who will win on November 3rd. The reason we know is found in early voting data. October voting is no longer the exclusive domain of the Democrat Party. Both parties vote early and in ever-increasing numbers, which makes the October vote an early action report on the election outcome that's more reality-based than on the polls and mainstream media. Who you vote for is a secret. When, where, and how many voters cast their ballots is not. It's data, and in this case, data in its most meaningful form, the number of early votes by registered Democrats, and the number of early votes by registered Republicans. Convincing the other party's voters to vote for your candidate is a long shot. Getting your voters to turn out for your candidate is how elections are won. It's called GOTV for Get Out the Vote. GOTV plus voter enthusiasm invariably equals winning results at the polls. In the final weeks of the campaign, enthusiasm for Donald Trump, demonstrated at multiple daily rallies, has been far beyond what it was 4 years ago. Will enthusiasm help produce another winning voter turnout for Trump? Spoiler alert, data generated by early voting says yes. To understand why history will repeat itself, it's important to look at voter turnout in party strongholds, districts where support is expected to be high. The highest Democrat voting percentages are often in districts with large majorities of African American voters. The black vote is a key component in the strategy of every Democrat election campaign, especially Joe Biden's. Accordingly, black turnout provides the best way to measure enthusiasm for the Democrat Party's candidate and ultimately to project a winner. Take North Carolina, for example. In 2012, black voter turnout for Barack Obama was understandably high. Black voters made up 27% of North Carolina's total number of voters that year. In 2016, The Hillary Clinton's turnout among blacks in the Tar Heel state dropped to 22%. This year with Biden running, North Carolina's black turnout for early voting is 19.5%. Then there's this, the black vote that is coming out is not all coming out for the Democrat. A poll by the University of New Orleans of likely Louisiana voters reported that 28% of blacks preferred Donald Trump. That's driven largely by black men, among whom Trump's 43% edges Biden's 42%. A Rasmussen National Survey, reflecting the same trends, shows Trump's approval among likely black voters at 46%. Approval does not translate directly into votes, but there is too much action in the form of early turnout behind the number to dismiss it. In 2016, Trump asked African Americans what they had to lose by backing him instead of Hillary Clinton. Apparently now they know. Under Trump, blacks saw record employment, the creation of economic opportunity zones, increased funding for black colleges, and the lowest incarceration rate for blacks since 1995. If the most reliable Democrat voting bloc loses its enthusiasm for Biden, his chances in the South and elsewhere disappear. Florida shows how that looks. Sunshine State Republicans outperformed expectations in early voting. Democrats are ahead in mail-in ballots, but not by the numbers needed to be the GOP on Election Day, when Republicans traditionally come out to vote in droves. Rasmussen's daily tracking poll found that by the end of October, over 31% of black Florida voters said they would vote for Trump. Trump broke through the Democrats' blue wall defense in 2016, and now he looks like a serious threat to their black wall in 2020. Trump is still going to lose a black vote. He's just going to lose it by less. The question again is how many early voting Democrats actually voted Democrat? Trump won with backing from Democrats in 2016, so why would they abandon him now? Donald Trump has overwhelming support among Republicans, says Pew reports. Biden's support from fellow Democrats stems largely from their dislike of Trump rather than an affinity for Joe, and Biden can attract a crowd much larger than his Secret Service detail. That's certainly not true of Trump. In fact, there's no better source of actionable data than a Trump rally, because everyone who wants to attend has to provide contact information to get a free ticket. The campaign then uses this data to turn every event into a force multiplier. First, each rally reaches millions of voters live at the venue, on cable TV and on YouTube. Then millions more engage on Facebook and Twitter. After the rally, a campaign team targets those who attended with digital ads that recipients can retarget to their contacts as lookalike campaigns on social media. The party also mines the same data for useful insights and information it can convert into turnout. Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel noted that 45% of the attendees at an October New Hampshire rally were not registered Republicans, and 20% did not vote in 2016. Who would wait in line for hours to see a Trump rally in October and then not vote for Trump in November? It's easy to predict there would be many new Trump voters this year in more states than just New Hampshire. In modern times, very few vice presidents were serial losers in primaries succeeded in winning the White House. Joe Biden has both of those things going against him. And that's before factoring in China Burisma-Gate allegations directed at him and his family, Barack Obama's low-impact performance on the campaign trail, and the anti-police riots in Philadelphia, all of which will help Trump. Finally, there's a matter of voting or polling. Most polls are commissioned by media organizations that are openly hostile to Trump. Why should anyone believe them now, making basically the same anti-Trump predictions that were completely wrong in 2016? One polling company, though, stands out. The Trafalgar Group accurately predicted Trump would win Michigan and Pennsylvania in 2016. Now Trafalgar forecasts Trump will take Florida, Michigan, and Arizona. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer could be more disappointed than Joe Biden on election night. Trafalgar has African-American GOP Senate candidate John James slightly ahead in Michigan. Trump may drag Senator Matthew McSally over the finish line in Arizona, and Alabama will return its Senate seat to the GOP. It's also hard to see how a cresting wave of Trump enthusiasm won't create a GOTV result. that keeps Colorado's Republican Senator Cory Gardner in his job. The bottom line is simple math. When you add the electoral votes from reliably red states to any reaching the blue wall, Trump wins again, possibly even larger than he did last time. That may not be the October surprise you expected, but then that's why they call it a surprise. Now, I've done a video doing my own prediction on what's going to happen. I'm thinking Trump will get probably 333 electoral votes, and I'll post it right after this video, so stay tuned. Like I've been saying, things are really getting interesting today. As a matter of fact, the president is doing 5 rallies with the last one about 10:30 tonight. So it should be interesting to see the turnout from there. And I'll be back tomorrow with an election preview, even though the election is already in shape. With the election tomorrow, I figured I'd give you my take as to what I think will happen during the presidential election. I got this from 270towin.com using their map. And as you can tell, I have it 333 for Trump, 205 for Biden. Trump's going to win all of the states that he won last time. And I strongly think he's going to pick up Virginia and New Hampshire this time. You know, I mean, he is a lot more energized. You know, the crowds are out there. And yeah, I just think that 333 electoral votes for Trump will get him over the edge. Of course, you only need 270 to win, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll drop the link to my user map in the description section, and I'll see you in the next video. Well, today is the day. Election day is upon us. The first electoral votes should be coming in about 7 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, so we might be in for a long night. Then again, we might be in for a quick and easy night. I had done my own electoral college prediction in a separate video, which is linked in the description below. So check that out. And there are many articles. This is going to be a mother of all videos. So hunker in as I give you a preview of what is to come tonight. Got this article right here from the USA Today. Election 2020, all eyes will be on these 6 states on election day. Here's what we know. I'll just give a preview of this. You'll want to keep an eye on 6 states above all others in Tuesday's election, and possibly in the days afterward. 3 states, the Great Lakes battlegrounds of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and the Sunbelt battlegrounds of Arizona, Florida, and North Carolina are more likely than any others to determine whether Republican Donald Trump or Democrat Joe Biden captures an electoral college majority. They account for every one of the 15 top markets in the presidential ad wars in the closing weeks of the campaign, according to the Wesleyan Media Project. And they're where Trump and Biden have made the most recent visits in the run-up to Tuesday. These 6 states represent 101 of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. If this contest is as close as 2016 was, where fewer than 80,000 votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania decided the presidency, expect these states to again provide most of the suspense. Early voting amid the pandemic has exploded in most of these states. Florida and North Carolina passed 90% of their 2016 turnout, while Arizona has passed 80%, Wisconsin has passed 60%, and Michigan has passed 50%, according to the U.S. Elections Project. TV spending is off the charts with $1.5 billion in presidential ad spending since April by candidates and groups, according to Wesleyan. Trump has outspent Biden on digital advertising, and Biden has outspent Trump on television. Attention will be on these 6 days, first and foremost, Tuesday night. And we have Michigan. It says of all the battleground states that flipped from blue to red 4 years ago, Michigan still appears most likely to swing back to supporting the Democrat nominee. And it says that Biden hasn't been taking the state for granted, neither has Trump. You know, both of them had made stops in various cities. Democrats have been blitzing the state with TV ads with some 18,100 spots between October 12th and 25th. And unless another court intervenes, clerks need to receive absentee ballots by 8 p.m. on election day. However, a court overturned an earlier ruling, giving clerks up to 2 weeks to count ballots as long as they were postmarked the day before the election. Another battleground state is Wisconsin, and Trump visited Wisconsin 5 times in October, touching down in southern Wisconsin. Biden only made one stop in the state on Friday, but has outspent Trump on TV advertising, and he's led consistently in the polling. And it says here that, you know, the high turnout state has cast around 1.9 million votes ahead of election day, which is more than 60% of its 2016 vote. And it says that the tally is expected to linger into Wednesday, especially in the state's biggest city, Milwaukee. The majority of Milwaukee's votes will be absentee, and they are counted separately from the election day vote. So the final tally may not come in until the early hours of Wednesday. Pennsylvania is another key battleground. If the race for Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes were any hotter, it could melt steel. Trump and Biden have been ratcheting up their attempts to capture the Keystone State, which Trump won by just 44,300 votes in 2016. And Trump has been a weekly presence in the state, sometimes attending 2 or more rallies in a day. As of Thursday, Trump or his surrogates have visited Pennsylvania 10 times. Biden held a town hall in Philadelphia and visited Erie and Lancaster. And his campaign announced Friday that he, his wife Jill, running mate Senator Kamala Harris, and her husband Doug Emhoff will brainstorm Pennsylvania on Monday and fan out across the 4 corners of the state. About 3.1 million Pennsylvania voters requested mail-in or absentee ballots for the general election, and 2.1 million ballots have been returned by October 29, according to electproject.org. And it says here that 2 recent polls show Biden maintaining his lead over Trump in Pennsylvania, where the Democratic challenger and Scranton native has enjoyed a consistent but fluctuating advantage. Another key battleground state is North Carolina. Biden has so many blue state electoral college votes behind him that political scientists say he can afford to lose North Carolina, but Trump's path to victory may be or will be extremely difficult without the Tar Heel state. Not that Biden is ignoring North Carolina, far from it. And it says that with its 15 electoral votes on the line, both Trump and Biden have flooded the zone with campaign events and advertising. Trump is visited so frequently that one man joked that the president should start paying property taxes. Harris made 2 stops Sunday in smaller cities. Trump rallied in North Carolina the same day and has another stop planned Monday. His third and fourth visits to North Carolina in 9 days. Although one of the 4 stops to meet Special Forces soldiers in private in Fort Bragg technically wasn't considered to be a campaign event. And it says here that early voting ended Saturday. As of Sunday afternoon, 4.54 million North Carolinians have already cast their ballots via early voting and mail-in ballot. That's nearly 62% of registered voters. And 2020's pre-election total is nearly 96% of the total turnout, but in the 2016 presidential or 2016 general election, Arizona, another key battleground state, has entered October, leaning slightly to Biden, and he has entered election day with a small polling lead. The usually Republican-leaning state has likely set a record for visits by major party candidates, with 16 this year. In October alone, all 4 members of the tickets visited a combined 17 times. And it says here that more than 80% of Arizona's ballots will be cast early, and officials began telling them days ago. These reports should be announced shortly after 10 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. And it says that early ballots that are counted or that are turned in on the election day could take days to count because of the signature verification process, meaning that if the state remains too close to call, the final vote could take days to come in. It took 6 days before the winner of Arizona's 2018 U.S. Senate race was formally known. Final key battleground state is Florida, which is a toss-up heading into Election Day and is being closely watched because it could have final results Tuesday. While other swing states could be counting mail votes for several days, Florida begins counting mail ballots weeks before the election, allowing it to report results earlier. If Trump loses Florida, it will be more difficult for him to contest the election results elsewhere. Ballots are being counted after Election Day, but polls show the president has a good chance of carrying the state. Real Clear Politics average of Florida polls last week briefly had Trump leading Biden for the first time since April. As of Sunday, Biden was up 1.4 percentage points in the polling average, well within striking distance for Trump. Trump and Biden have been campaigning regularly in the state in the closing stretch. The last 10 days of the race saw Trump cast his vote in Palm Beach. Former President Obama held car rallies in Miami and Orlando. Biden traveled to Tampa and Broward County. Trump returned for a Tampa rally. Florida is the largest swing state with 29 electoral college votes. It is a must-win for Trump, who has his permanent residence in Palm Beach. Biden could lose the state and still win, but he's hoping Florida delivers a knockout punch. Right here in Florida, it's up to you. You hold the key. Biden told the crowd in Broward County last week. If Florida goes blue, it's over. It's over. Earlier and later in the day, Trump told the crowd in Tampa that we are going to win Florida and we're going to win 4 more years. Now, I live in Florida, and there's a small stretch of interstate called Interstate 4. That's commonly known as the I-4 corridor. And conventional wisdom says how the I-4 corridor goes, and Interstate 4 stretches from Tampa to Daytona Beach via Orlando. As a matter of fact, let me pull up the map here and show you just what I'm talking about here. But yeah, I mean the I-4 corridor is just a small stretch of land, or rather, there's a stretch of road from the Tampa St. Pete area to Titusville, and even on up into Daytona Beach. Actually, it ends right in Daytona. Let me just show you right here and scroll it in. Yeah, I-4 starts in St. Petersburg, runs through Tampa, Orlando, Sanford, and ends in Daytona Beach. Actually, right by the Daytona Speedway. As that corridor goes, so goes the rest of Florida. So keep a look, keep an eye out for the I-4 corridor because that is basically make or break for Florida. Now what to know for tonight? Got this from FoxNews.com, and it says voters are casting their ballots nationwide Tuesday to vote whether the next president of the United States will be Donald Trump or Joe Biden, even as tens of millions have already voted either early or through the mail. We already went through the battleground states. And it says here that if Trump cannot win in Pennsylvania and by extension potentially Michigan or Wisconsin, it could put him on a very strong path to a second term. Meanwhile, a win for Biden in Pennsylvania almost certainly forecloses a Trump path to victory. And there are other states, Georgia, Arizona, and North Carolina, as well as a handful of other moderate states, also figure to potentially play an important role Tuesday night, depending on the Electoral College scenario. First states to have all polls closed will come Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern in Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. Kentucky and Indiana will have some polls closed at the Eastern time parts of the state at 6. Last polls of the night will close at 1 a.m. Eastern in Alaska. So we could very well see some early electoral votes come in. Then Florida's polls close at 7 p.m. local time, which means full state results from the state will not begin to feed in until 8 p.m. Eastern, as Florida is in the central time zone. There's a panhandle thing. Polls in North Carolina and Ohio close at 7:30 p.m. Maine, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania close their polls at 8 p.m. Eastern. Texas closes its polls at 7 p.m. local time, which means that most of the state's polls will close at 8 p.m. Eastern. Some of the far western parts of Texas are in mountain time and will see their polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern. Arizona, Michigan, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Wisconsin all close polls at 9 p.m. Eastern. Iowa and Nevada close their polls at 10. So from there, we have the waiting begins. As states report their results, news organizations are competing to see which one can be first to make an official call of an election. The organizations look at votes for each candidate as the incomplete totals are reported, the percentage of states that have been reported, and how a state has voted in the past. So in 2020, many states, including key swing states, may count their votes more slowly than during typical years. And there are also cases, Pennsylvania and North Carolina, for example, where election boards will count ballots that were mailed on or before election day but are received days later. Pennsylvania will accept ballots for up to 3 days after election day, and North Carolina will accept ballots for 9 days. Traditionally, Democrats have done more early and mail voting than Republicans, who largely prefer to vote in person. That effect has been amplified by the coronavirus pandemic, according to reports, as use of those methods has increased by those wishing to stay away from the polls. States that report their early and mail-in votes immediately after polls close will likely start with a swing toward Biden, then see numbers get closer as the night goes on while in-person votes are counted. States that take longer to count their mail votes are likely to see vote counts that favor Trump early on Tuesday night as in-person totals come in, and then a swing toward Biden later in the evening and potentially in the later days. There is also a few Senate races to watch. And the House is widely expected to remain in Democrat hands. In the Senate, it is 53-47 Republicans. So Republicans, all they have to do is lose 3 and hope that Trump wins, because if Trump wins, then that means that Mike Pence will be the key tiebreaker. So they can afford to lose 3 and have a tie, and just pray that Trump wins. Now, and there are 5 key states to watch on election night, most of which I had already mentioned. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina. So I won't read that article. However, I will link to it in the description below. Now, one interesting thing is that Twitter named 7 outlets to call election results. Twitter on Monday provided more details about its policies around tweets that declare election results, and it named the 7 outlets that it will lean on to help it determine whether a race is officially called. The list includes ABC News, AP, CNN, CBS News, Decision Desk HQ, Fox News, and NBC News, all outlets that experts agree have verified unbiased decision desks calling elections. Some conservatives have alleged that Twitter is biased against them. In the past few weeks, data from the Stanford Cable TV Analyzer shows that Fox News has discussed Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey and big tech censorship at length. Fox News' decision desk is considered very authoritative and is highly respected among media and politics insiders. By including Fox News' decision desk in this list, Twitter is saying that it believes its decision desk is verified and legitimate. Twitter previously said that it would require either an announcement from state election officials or a public projection from at least 2 authoritative national news outlets that make independent calls about the race before letting tweets about the results go by unlabeled. If one of the 7 outlets tweets from its main handle a result before another outlet from the group of 7 confirm it, Twitter won't label that tweet. If a reporter or any Twitter user tweets a result without citing one of the select outlets for its decision, that tweet may be labeled. The Twitter label will say official results may not have called the race when this tweeted. Find out more. That label will link to Twitter's curated elections information hub. Axios' Jonathan Swan reported on Sunday that President Trump has told confidants he'll declare victory on Tuesday night if it looks like he's ahead in the polls, even if the outcome is not yet determined. Tech platforms have introduced an array of rules and protocols around premature claims of victory on election night, given the unusual nature of this year's election. And there's chaos, anxiety, and optimism inside the Trump campaign's final mad dash. Last night, I think he had 5 rallies yesterday. Today, he's gonna watch the results from the White House. So and it says here that aides have said that they're previously or particularly encouraged by internal numbers that they're seeing in Florida and Arizona, where the campaign believes it is doing better among seniors and Latinos than the public polls are accounting for. They're drawing comfort from early turnout numbers in North Carolina and Georgia among Republicans and white non-college educated voters. I just don't think the pollsters' models are accurately capturing what the turnout is going to be, said a campaign official who has worked on both Trump races and went into election day last time expecting a loss. I think they're missing the real vote. I think they're not capturing the growth we're seeing in the minority communities. So even if Trump is able to hold on to Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina, as well as more traditionally solid Republican states that pose now indicate he'll be toss-ups like Georgia and Texas, he can afford to lose only 2 of the 3 states, which is why he has made more than a dozen stops in the 3 states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania over the past week, and has more planned than the campaign's final hours. But while Trump continues to hold rallies in Michigan and Wisconsin, even his advisors who say he can pull off a victory on election day view winning those 2 states as a long shot, with polls consistently showing him trailing in both, sometime outside the polls margins of error. So that's from NBC. I'll link that below. Now, regarding everything that's going on, it is important to keep a cool head. And that's why there's this from Latter-day Saint Mag. Keeping cool during high political drama. The political climate is pretty hot right now. Threats, scandals, rebel attacks, social unrest, corruption, and control tactics are all part of the current political scene. People are preparing for the worst no matter what the United States election turns out like. What preparations are the most effective? Preparing your own heart to be calm and focused on truth is the best way to prepare. Having self-government during times of political drama is what people do to stay calm. However, to have a self-government, a person must plan ahead. Lessons learned from the last presidential election. Following the election of President Trump 4 years ago, angry rioters took to the streets, destroying property and making cities unsafe. Some U.S. cities became hotbeds of hate. When I was at the United Nations in March of 2017, people even protested me, blocked hallways, and threatened to burn my pamphlets because they thought I was too much like Trump. Even before they heard me speak, I was going to talk about stopping child abuse. This group that attacked me and my colleagues spoke right before I did about rioting and protesting. They were planning at the United Nations to attack Trump Tower in New York. I suppose I was just a person in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I learned something. This group of very intelligent people were so easily incited to anger. The speaker got them emotional, angry, and ready to do something irrational very quickly. And because I was the next speaker, I got to taste of their freshly planted wrath. As a side note, the security at the United Nations didn't stop these angry mobs from attacking us either. They seemed to either be afraid or they wanted to show or to allow the aggressive demonstration. Here I was, a woman trying to bring awareness of the hidden abuse of children and offering some solutions, and I was unexpectedly a threat to their anti-Trump cause. The lesson I learned was that angry people attack everyone, not just the people they think they're angry at. Spreading anger is always destructive. No matter who wins the election, can we all decide that spreading hate only hurts people because it doesn't help? Self-governed people find solutions. They don't spread rage and get people worked up to hate each other. Self-government means being calm and collected. It means thinking about your actions and the principles behind those actions before taking any action at all. And the United States was created as a self-governing nation. From its inception, we need to stay true to that. And this article by Nicole goes on to have skills for success. When I teach parents about how to teach their children self-government, I tell them to teach their children the 4 basic skills for self-government. The skills are following instructions, accepting no answers and criticism, accepting consequences, and disagreeing appropriately. Each one of these skills has a skill set. For this article, I'll discuss the 2 skill sets that will be of greatest help to us all as we prepare for election results. Accepting no answers and criticism. Look at the person or situation. Keep a calm face, voice, and body. Say okay or disagree appropriately. Drop the subject. Disagreeing appropriately. Look at the person or situation. Keep a calm face, voice, and body. Seek to understand the other person's point of view, aka really care. Explain your point of view. Listen to what they have to say. Say okay, then drop the subject. If your candidate doesn't win the election, look at the situation as if someone just told you, no, you don't get what you wanted, then keep a calm face, voice, and body, say okay or disagree appropriately, and finally drop the subject. Were the rioters after the last election accepting no answers or disagreeing appropriately? No, but they should have. Calmness is part of disagreeing appropriately. They were not accepting a no answer. The historical peaceful transfer of power in free countries is based on the given that people can have self-government and accept change calmly. After a calm display of disappointment or warning, disagreeing appropriately was given to the proper people. Then the person was disappointed by the election outcome would have to say, okay, accept the decision of the people and drop the subject. The drop the subject step is often the hardest for people because they must stop feeding their emotions and turn their actions over to their logical side. The United States, which was founded on the principle of self-government, can change the emotional and social outcome of this coming election if they keep their hearts in the right place and focus on logically assessing and controlling themselves instead of focusing on controlling political outcomes or each other. Please learn these skills and plan to accept no answers and criticism with a spirit of calmness this year. If action must be taken because of corruption, etc., I hope it will be done with calmness and principle. That is how a person properly solves problems and disagrees appropriately when they are a self-governing person. Now, there is a lot of disagreement going on. I've seen it even on social media and on the news, but yeah, I mean, just sometimes it's good to keep a level head. I know I admit that I have a hard time with that at times, but it's well worth it. And I mean, this is a very serious election, and I will have the results probably tomorrow. But if not, I'll keep everybody updated as to what will happen, and keep it here. And I'll see you in the next video. The election was held yesterday, and we still have no winner in the presidential race. However, we do have a couple of races that had been called. We have this from 272win.com, which is a very good site, and I highly recommend it for all your presidential picks. It's called 272win.com, and it says here, Wisconsin called for Biden, Maine second for Trump, remaining paths to 270 electoral votes. Based on our earlier article, Wisconsin was called for Joe Biden, while Maine's second district was won again by Donald Trump. Wisconsin becomes the first state to flip from 2016, although Biden did also capture Nebraska's second district. That leaves 7 states where a winner has not been projected. Based on the current map, there were 18 paths for Biden to 270, 11 for Trump, and 2 that would result in a 269-269 tie. Some outlets have called Arizona for Biden. A results provider, Decision Desk HQ, has not had as of yet. Click the image below to use a Road to 270 feature to game out the uncalled states. And in the article, which doesn't show up here in the reader mode, it says that there are live vote counts for the 7 uncalled states aside from Nevada. All those states were won by Donald Trump in 2016. Highly recommend you read the article and also just play around with the graphic. And as it stands now, Biden has 237, Trump has 214, with Wisconsin and Maine's second congressional district called. Seemed like my prediction apparently just fell by the wayside. I had predicted 333 electoral votes for Trump, but not going to happen unless, of course, there are going to be a lot of recounts and recalls and all that good stuff. And there are 5 takeaways from election night. Got this from thehill.com. 5 takeaways from election night 2020. The result of the 2020 presidential election was in doubt in the early hours of Wednesday after a complicated and dramatic election night, but there are some important takeaways. Win or lose, Trump overperformed. Trump has, at the very least, performed better than most polls were predicting, even though the outcome of the race for the Electoral College with Democrat nominee Joe Biden remained unclear. Trump's best result of the night came early when he won Florida relatively comfortably, bagging his 29 in the Electoral College votes. There are still votes being counted in the Sunshine State, but it seems almost certain that Trump has improved on his 1.2 point margin of victory there from 4 years ago. Trump still retains real hopes of winning the election, though his chances now lean heavily on pulling a surprise by holding on to either Michigan or Wisconsin. In Pennsylvania, Trump had a wider lead, though a huge advantage in mail-in ballots could save the state for Biden. Trump held on easily in states that Democrats believe could be competitive, including Ohio and Iowa. He seems to have a slight edge in North Carolina, which was higher on Biden's target list. A bad night for pollsters, again. Going into Election Day, the verdict was clear from the polls. Biden was on course for comfortable victory. It didn't turn out that way, again. Biden has lost Florida and appears likely to lose North Carolina, having led both states in polling averages going into Election Day. As in 2016, Trump appears to have outperformed the polls in the Rust Belt and Upper Midwest. It will be some time before the full national result is known, but Biden's polling lead, which averaged around 8 points, suggested an ease of victory that has simply not occurred. After 2016, there was much talk of how pollsters had improved their methods. Now they will face a whole raft of new questions, including whether they're simply missing some part of Trump's appeal. Trump's early hours speech stirred fear. Trump had denied media reports over the final weekend of the campaign that he would declare victory prematurely. He then appeared at the White House after 2 a.m. Wednesday and did exactly that. Trump claimed he had won the states of Georgia and North Carolina. No media organization had projected those victories at that time. Trump further insisted that the election was set to fall victim to fraud if outstanding votes were counted. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country, Trump said, pledging that he would be going to the U.S. Supreme Court in order to get all voting to stop. The remarks played right into the characterization of Trump as a would-be authoritarian and upped the chances of the kind of unrest many Americans had feared in the election's aftermath. In the process, they also overshadowed a night on which the president's electoral performance has surpassed expectations. Media consensus on Trump is at odds with public perception. Over the course of his tenure, mainstream news outlets from CNN to the New York Times have become increasingly willing to brand Trump as a misogynist and a racist. They assert that his record is plain, but a significant share of the public, beyond the stereotype of the MAGA base, seems to disagree. According to exit polls this year, Trump won wide women's support by a slightly greater margin, 11 points rather than 9 points, than he did in 2016. His deficit among all women remained unchanged at 13 points. Now this year, Trump drew the support of 18% of black men, up from 13% 4 years ago, and boosted his overall black support from 8 points to 12 points. Trump's support among Latinos at 32% was higher by 4 points than it stood 4 years ago. Those differences cannot be ascribed to the exit polls being skewed by the preponderance of the early voting this year. The organization conducting the exit polls corrected for that phenomenon by conducting interviews with early in-person voters and making phone calls to those who have voted by mail. Put simply, there are plenty of people beyond white men who just don't accept the reactionary version of Trump that is often portrayed by the media. No ringing endorsement for Biden. If Joe Biden ends up being president, it will be the crowning achievement of a 50-year political career, but it will hardly have come in emphatic style. Running against a highly unpopular president amid a catastrophic pandemic, Biden, if he wins, seems to, at best, to have eked out a narrow victory. It's an outcome that is likely to give Biden pause for thought. as it is far from a ringing endorsement of the 77-year-old former vice president. It also demonstrates the extent to which the nation is cleaved in half. Biden, if elected, has challenges in winning more Americans over to his side in a more polarized time. And that's what I mean. This has been a contentious election. To steal a well-known phrase from George Wendt and from Cheers and paraphrasing it, politics is a dog-eat-dog world, and we're wearing milk-bone underwear. So it'll be interesting to see just what happens over the next few days. And we have this from the Daily Signal spelling it out. No winner yet. Fight for the White House could drag on for days or weeks. For the first time in years, Americans will wake up Wednesday morning after the presidential election uncertain of who their president will be on January 20th. President Donald Trump, a Republican, outperformed expectations in winning Florida. His Democrat opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden, flipped on longtime Republican stronghold Arizona. But the key states, battleground states of Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin still had not been called by 6 a.m. Wednesday. Neither the Republican ticket of Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, nor the Democrat ticket of Biden and Vice Presidential nominee Kamala Harris, a senator from California, had reached the necessary 270 electoral votes. The results in Pennsylvania may not be known for days or longer. That's at least in part due to the prevalence of mail-in and absentee voting this year. In the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, before 1 a.m., Biden addressed horn-honking supporters in a parking lot in Wilmington, Delaware, speaking for just over 3 minutes. I'm here to tell you tonight we believe we're on a track to win this election, Biden said. We know because of the unprecedented early voting, the mail-in vote, and it's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of counting your votes is finished. It ain't over until every vote is counted, every ballot is counted. At the same time, Trump tweeted a warning of an attempt to steal the election. We are up big, but they're trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after the polls are closed. Trump spoke to supporters in the East Room of the White House for more than 10 minutes, starting at 2:21 a.m. Wednesday. I want to thank the American people for their tremendous support. Millions and millions of people voted for us tonight, and a very sad group of people are just trying to disenfranchise that group of people, and we won't stand for it, Trump told his extended family and supporters. Trump referred to his leads in Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and added, they can't catch us. We had such a big night. Just take a look at all these states that we won tonight, and you take a look at the kind of margins we won them by, Trump said. The president predicted that Democrats now will go to court, saying, this is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We'll be going to the Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find ballots at 4 a.m. in the morning and add them to the list. In 2000, the election dispute between Republican George W. Bush and Democrat Al Gore over Florida's 25 electoral college votes was litigated all the way to the Supreme Court. Litigation could be more complicated this time with multiple states at stake and more electoral votes in question. If mail-in voting delays the outcome, some of those issues could have been predictable, says Hans von Spakovsky, manager of the Heritage Foundation's Election Law Reform Project. In the New York primary in June, there was a large number, an unacceptably large number, in my view, of absentee ballots that were rejected, von Spakovsky told the Daily Signal. In key states, if the number of rejected ballots is larger than the margin of victory, you will see litigation over every one of those ballots. In that New York congressional primary, about 84,000 absentee ballots were rejected for various reasons. The contest saw Representative Carolyn Maloney, Democrat New York, declare victory after about 6 weeks in her primary contest in New York's 12th congressional district against progressive insurgent challenger Suraj Patel. Now, different states have different standards for accepting or disqualifying absentee ballots, and as such, the High Court will likely have to hear the cases from most states individually, Von Spakovsky said. That's unlike the post-election dispute in 2000 that saw just one state vote in dispute. Bush eventually won that state by just 537 votes. Another potential scenario would be the states in question could certify competing electoral returns, as happened in the 1876 election, in which the states of Louisiana, South Carolina, Florida, and one electoral vote in Oregon were in dispute. Congress appointed a bipartisan commission of 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats, made up of members of the House, Senate, and Supreme Court. After the commission issued predictable 8-7 votes regarding the disputed, awarding the disputed votes to Republican Arthur B. Hayes over Democrat Samuel Tilden, the Democrat-controlled House and Republican-controlled Senate fought over whether to accept the recommendations before reaching a deal that involved ending Reconstruction in the South. In the elections of 1800 and 1824, no candidate had a majority of electoral votes, which threw the election to the House of Representatives to decide. And that's true. I mean, 1800 and 1824 saw the House work on, vote for the president. And unlike in November when there were millions of votes being counted, what happens in the House of Representatives is each state delegation has one vote as opposed to 535 separate votes. In order to win in the House of Representatives, in order to win the presidency in the House of Representatives, rather, the candidate has to receive 26 state delegation votes, which is 50% plus one. Now, and I could see that as feasible. I mean, it all depends on just how the state delegates or how the state congressional delegations will be aligned, because there are a couple of races that are still undecided in both the House and the Senate. So it'll be quite interesting to see just what happens come November or come January 3rd when the 117th Congress comes into session, and I believe January 5th or 6th when the electoral votes are certified. Now, while the House votes by state congressional delegation, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, I'll look into it and get back to you later. In the Senate, if no candidate receives the required 270 votes for vice president, then the Senate has one vote per senator. I'll have to look into that more and update you on that. Might do that come tomorrow or Friday, but we have in for a very long vote, and this coming from Ala Pundit from Hot Air. Trump says, "What's wrong with these surprise ballot dumps eating into my leads?" Update about those 138,000 Biden votes. This coming in at 11:28 today. Nothing surprising about it, as you, the reader, doubtless know by now, and as Trump may or may not know. I think he probably does know and is feigning ignorance, but he consumes a lot of garbage information, and he's always had a conspiratorial mind. I'd say it's 50-50 on whether he truly believes this. Last night I was leading, often solidly in many key states. In almost all instances, Democrat running controlled. Then one by one they started to magically disappear. Surprise ballot dumps were counted. Very strange, and the pollsters got completely and historically wrong. That's one tweet. Another tweet says, how come every time they count mail-in ballot dumps, they are so devastating in the percentage and power of destruction? For months now, political nerds have been forecasting a blue shift in some states on or after election nights. In other states, there's a red shift. It all depends on when a state counts its mail ballots. Mail votes are trending heavily blue this year for a few reasons. Democrats tend to worry more about COVID than Republicans do, so go figure that they'd be keener to vote in a way that doesn't require them to mingle inside a crowded polling place. Additionally, Trump's long effort to demagogue mail voting as inherently fraudulent scared Republicans away from voting that way. GOP officials at the state level have been warning for months that his rhetoric turned right-wing voters solidly against voting by mail, resulting in a deeply blue electorate among mail ballots. Finally, Dems tend to vote earlier than Republicans do as a rule, and mail ballots are the earliest possible way to vote. They, I suppose, bear out the partisan split in mail versus same-day voting. Pennsylvania, early voters has Biden up 56, election day Trump up 26. In Michigan, early voters has Biden up 45, election day Trump up 32. Wisconsin, early voters, Biden up 39, election day Trump up 30, according to political polls on Twitter. You may remember that Joe Biden jumped out to a big lead in Florida early last night, but there was never any real lead. Florida simply counts its mail ballots as they received rather than waiting until election day to start opening envelopes. The tally of votes by mail goes up promptly when polls close, and those mail votes naturally turn heavily blue. Then comes the tally of same-day votes, which turned heavily red, the so-called red shift. And in the results, at the end of the day, Trump won easily. Biden's early lead was a blue mirage. All that's happening right now in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin is that same process in reverse. In those states, the heavily red same-day votes get reported first. Then the mail ballots that are being counted, the so-called blue shift, revealing Trump's early lead to be a red mirage. There are 3 points to note about this. Number one, nearly all of the mail ballots being counted today arrived well before Election Day. Some may have arrived last night or this morning or whatever, but most of those ballots have been sitting in some election office, gathering dust because by law they can't be counted until November 3rd. Hardly anyone among them missed the deadline in sending their ballot in. Number two, Republicans insisted on waiting until November 3rd to start the count. Democrats begged them to change the law and do what Florida does, counting mail ballots early so that we know the full results on election night. Republicans said no, and there's only one logical reason for them to have done that. Given the president's insistence over the past week that Americans deserve to know who's president by midnight on November 3rd, they wanted to manufacture a red mirage in the Rust Belt precisely so that Trump could lie to our stupid faces about chicanery causing his lead to evaporate again. All we're seeing in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania today is what happened last night in Florida, but in reverse. The GOP wants you to believe otherwise, and so they don't have to admit Trump lost fair and square. And number three, per my point above about partisan polarization, Trump's own rhetoric about mail ballots this year ensured they'd be even more solidly blue than usual. He wanted Republican voters to view voting by mail as corrupt or unpatriotic or whatever, and he succeeded. Now he pretends to be surprised that there were 80-20 leans again towards Biden among the people who did choose to vote that way. Or like I say, maybe he really is surprised. Maybe same-day votes get counted first, mail votes get counted later. It's too complicated for him. In fairness, both sides are pushing bogus claims of voter fraud this morning. Trump himself has seized on the fact that an update posted to some results page somewhere shows Biden gaining 130,000 votes to 0 for the president. it's cheating or it's just a quirk of how they're inputting the numbers, and Trump's share of that batch of votes will be posted soon enough. Dan McLaughlin tweeted out, I noted these last night, a few minutes apart. Please remember that what looks like election results discovering big shifts in the voting is actually just somebody in between the vote counters and their press websites making a typo or having to juggle multiple streams of data. Charles Fain Layman tweeted out, which is a plausible explanation here. Voter fraud so ham-fisted that they didn't even bother to give Trump a few votes for cover, or a byproduct of how vote totals are being reported or posted. Now, if you're going to rig an election, why would you make it so obvious as opposed to 130,000 to 0 update? Just stay cool. Meanwhile, Democrats are whining that maybe there's a secret batch of mail ballots that never returned. John Kuzel tweeted out, breaking new USPS data appears to show a failure to deliver mail ballots from voters across the country on Election Day. U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan will hold a noon hearing over USPS's non-compliance with its order yesterday to rush deliver all remaining mail ballots. Rice has a solid debunking of that. Some ballots may not be getting scanned by the Postal Service, but that doesn't mean that they're not being delivered. The USPS is probably just being a bit sloppy, keeping records internally in its haste to get ballots where they need to go. Because Trump is Trump, he's now forced his own allies to choose between either drilling him in his sinister con about the blue shift, being a form of cheating, or of having to side against him. We're still very early in this process, but indications are that only the hardest of hardcore MAGA eyes will go along, others won't. Marco Rubio said the result of the presidential race will be known after every legally cast vote had been counted. Ben Shapiro tweeted out, no, Trump has not already won the election, and it is deeply irresponsible for him to say he has. As you'll see below, there's a video. Chris Christie also reality checked him on the air last night after Trump predictably insisted that he'd won the election as a mail-in votes in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania were finally being counted. He also insisted he go to the Supreme Court for vindication, which makes no sense on its face. What legal claim does he think he has to stop the counting of valid ballots? But it makes perfect sense when you consider that Trump views politics in all forms as purely transactional. He put Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett on the court, so now they owe him. If they need to manufacture some legal complication that makes the blue shift illegitimate in order to keep him in power, that's their concern as far as that's their problem as far as he's concerned. Chris Christie on President Trump's election remarks. I talked tonight as a former U.S. attorney. There is no basis to make that argument tonight. There just isn't. I disagree with what he did tonight, and there are a couple of links in that tweet. Update: as expected, the mysterious 130,000 to 0 Biden vote haul was nothing more sinister than a typo, now corrected. Update: the influx of 138,339 Biden votes cited in the tweets about Michigan were the result of a data error. According to a spokesperson for Decision Desk HQ, the error was later rectified. DDHQ statement below, more here, and there are two tweets from Jane Litvinenko. Update: Matt McCowiak, who started the panic over vote rigging, has now retweeted. This tweet was taken and shared honestly. I've now learned the Michigan update reference was a typo in one county. I have deleted the original tweet. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I will say this much: we are definitely in for a long haul, and I will keep you updated in the days and possibly weeks ahead. Now, we are 2 days past the election, and there's still a few counts going on in Pennsylvania, Georgia. Apparently, Michigan had been called for Biden, and there were people saying that Arizona should be taken out of the Biden camp and put back either into the too close to call camp or into the Trump camp. And there are a lot of big winners and losers from the election. So got this from the Washington Free Beacon. Winners and losers of the 2020 election so far. Election day finally happened on Tuesday, but as of Wednesday, most of the key races remain too close to call. The lack of clarity, however, does not preclude an advanced analysis of the partial results. Even with many votes left to be counted, the election has already produced a number of clear winners and pathetic losers. Biggest winners, number one, Donald Trump, the biggest winner of election night by far. If he wins, he'll make America great again. If he loses, he will have already accomplished his goal of becoming the most famous person on earth, as well as President of the United States. He will have achieved an unprecedented level of success in just a single term in office, and will go down in history as one of the most illustrious leaders of the modern era. Plus, he's still the front runner in 2024. Either way, mission accomplished. Number two, Mitch McConnell. Just days after quarterbacking the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, the Senate Majority Leader dominated his Democrat challenger, Amy McGrath, who has raised tens of millions of dollars from liberal donors who apparently hate money as much as they hate Mitch McConnell. Regardless of who wins the presidency, it is now increasingly likely that Republicans will retain control of the Senate, where McConnell's benevolent reign of terror can proceed apace. Number three, racial diversity. Millions of Hispanics were instantly reclassified as white, mostly by aggrieved libs after it became clear that Trump would increase his share of the Hispanic vote significantly compared with 2016. The president also managed to win a larger percentage of the non-white vote than any Republican candidate since 1960. That's great news for Americans who value racial diversity, but bad news for the quote-unquote woke libs who favor racial division. Barack Obama promised to promote racial harmony. Trump has actually done it. Number four, law and order. At least in the short term, Trump's failure to secure a decisive win on election night means that Antifa thugs have temporarily postponed their plans to desecrate America's cities in protest against his election. That's a good thing. Trump could still win, so it's probably best to keep those storefronts boarded up a little longer just to be safe. And there are a couple of tweets and an update, never mind. Number five, ironically, Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden couldn't deliver an overwhelming victory. As foretold by the quote-unquote experts, he could still lose. That's great news for Hillary Clinton, whose 2016 loss to Trump was assessed by many to be the result of her unique deficiencies as a candidate and as a human being. The 2020 results suggest perhaps the Democrat Party's unique deficiencies as a political organization are to blame. Congrats. Biggest losers. Number one, the libs. They're going to be so owned if Trump wins. Even if he doesn't, this was not the overwhelming repudiation they would have liked. If Republicans hold the Senate, that means at least 2 more years of Mitch McConnell confirming judges on the reg, and absolutely no chance of any radical structural reforms being enacted. Number two, the experts. The polling in 2016 was way off. In an effort to correct those mistakes, professional pollsters ruthlessly scrutinized their methodologies and made the necessary changes. That's what they told us anyway. At this point, we should consider the possibility that the so-called experts really have no idea what they're doing. This year's polls were even less accurate than in 2016. Congrats. Number three, Lincoln Project donors. They gave millions of dollars to a bunch of ex-GOP grifters who wooed them with their quote-unquote edgy ad campaigns and promised to make a difference by taking down Trump's enablers in the Senate. The grifters are laughing all the way to the bank, while Mitch McConnell, Johnny Ernst, Susan Collins, Lindsey Graham, and probably Tom Tillis are laughing all the way to the Senate. Number four, court packers. See winner number two, race hucksters. See number three above. Trump's growing support among minority voters. ought to raise serious questions about whether the Democrat Party's race-obsessed woke rhetoric is little more than a masturbatory dog whistle for educated white liberals, using the term Latinx, which most actual Hispanics have never heard, might impress the New York Times editorial board, but it doesn't bring voters to the polls. And that's so true. And there are other winners and losers. This one coming from townhall.com, a column by Kurt Schlichter. And it says, as of this writing, and probably at many writings to come, the final decision about who won the election itself remains to be seen. But it's not only the politicians who won or lost. There are plenty of other winners and losers to go around. Let's praise and mock them respectively. Loser, the pollsters. You know, in the world we normal people dwell in, when you consistently fail, you get fired. But as in so many of our garbage establishment institutions, when you're a pollster, there is no accountability. You keep failing and failing and failing, and your dumb clients and the dumb media keep citing your garbage surveys. It's really remarkable. You would think they would have a little pride in themselves and not want to look like idiots, but no. Instead, it's our rating gives us Biden plus 15 in Texas. Gee, that sounds right. Let's go with that. Except for a few outlets, always the ones that take conservatives seriously enough to reach out to them, it's been a disaster. But next time we'll hear once again about how actually the polls were very accurate in 2020, as we have the same memory issues as the guy they were trying to help. The nice thing is that even the least woke Republican is woke to the poll scam now. Winner, the Republican Party's populist wing. The battle for the soul of the Republican Party is over, and we won. This is now the party of people who work for a living, people who have little companies, people who want their kids to grow up in a world of regular pronouns and we're going to churches and a hate crime. It's also a party that cares nothing about where your grandfather came from. We are winning black and Hispanic voters for our cause, not by condescending outreach, quote unquote, but by offering an agenda of good jobs and their kids are not being sent off to fight idiotic wars. It's not the party of the Chamber of Commerce. Hey, geniuses, how's that pivot to the Dems working out for you? It's not the party of the bow-tie dorks who snicker with their lib buddies over pumpkin-infused IPAs in Georgetown restaurant about those Walmart shopping, Jesus-liking hicks who make up the base. It's not the party of Wall Street. We have a party that happily includes both the Amish and Lil Pump. And the Democrats are the party of hedge funders, college professors, Antifa bums, and people who think The Handmaid's Tale is nonfiction. Loser, Fox News. I like Fox News from the moment it appeared, and I know people there and have been on it countless times pre-COVID. I am a fan and supporter, but sometimes you gotta have some real talk. Conservatives are furious with Fox. Livid. I see it in social media and in communications from readers. It's real and it's serious. As a group used to being sold out by people and institutions they trusted, conservatives are hypersensitive to anything that hints of betrayal, and they feel betrayed. Silencing Newt about Soros, Chris Wallace's debate performance, the terrible polls, and the awful calls by the Democrat hired to run the decision desk are all high on the list of complaints by former fans. This is a serious issue and gives me no pleasure, but the anger is real, and it will doubtless draw the most comments. Tucker's great ratings are great because he welcomes conservatives. Frankly, many conservatives now believe the majority of people associated with the network holds them in contempt. Fox needs to carefully rethink its direction and reach out to its loyal audience or it will go the way of Drudge. You remember the Drudge report, right? Yeah, me neither. Winner, alternative conservative media. That's what you are reading right now, folks. We have built an alternative media and it has saved us. Here on Town Hall, you can get the news and commentary you used to get elsewhere. There was election night coverage here. You know, you should join Town Hall VIP if you haven't. And another unlicensed, unofficial, and unapproved outlets that put the networks to shame. That's not just me saying it. People are wishing for smarter, better coverage that addresses what we think is important instead of telling us what to believe. In the years to come, especially if the Dems hold the White House, We will be the, well, we won't call it the resistance because those groups have wrecked that term forever with their ridiculous posturing. We'll be the alternative to the mainstream media's lies, and we'll be the vanguard for a coming counterattack on the rickety establishment. Loser, never Trumpers. To be fair, these pathetic Jibos are always losers, and they were fated to be losers regardless of the outcome of the election. Had the blue wave appeared, do you think that the Democrats would have celebrated these traitors and invited them to the party? They probably could have dragged out the grift a bit more, keeping for quarters like a cute little monkey with a hat for its organ grinding master on MSNBC panels as a token domesticated Republican. Maybe they could have found another Silicon Valley to write them checks. But in the end, they did nothing except ensure a perpetual contempt for them and their ilk. They imagined that after the Republican Party collapsed in ruins because of their mean tweets and unseen ads, we would come to them instead of rebuilding the party as, what, a second even less masculine Democrat Party? They are nothing, and off they will cruise into the sunset. Ahoy, losers! And, it's true. I mean, I always say this, and it always holds true. Andrew Breitbart said, the new media is taking over where the old media failed. That was a quote back in about 2009, 2010, just before he died. And it's true. We are the new media. We are the alternative media to ABC, CBS, NBC, now Fox, CNN, PBS, so if you want your fix of news, there are a lot of other places. I bring you news here every week with my week in review. And of course, there are a couple of other people who do news. OANN for one, Newsmax. There's also a site called Patriot Soapbox, which I'm a huge fan of. So yeah, take a listen, take a watch of other mainstream media, or rather other alternative media, and you'll see that the truth is out there, folks. And just as the alternative media refuses to lose, we have a president who refuses to lose. And this coming from actually Real Clear Politics, which has a good poll, but sometimes it's hard to make what they say, but it's interesting. Election week has come and gone, but election week has just begun. So says the Trump campaign, whose chief strategist urged reporters Wednesday evening to wait and see what happens by Friday. By the end of this week, Jason Miller said in a conference call, it will be clear to the entire nation that President Trump and Vice President Pence will be re-elected for another 4 years. And on the same call, the campaign not only claimed that it had a good chance of winning Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin, it unilaterally and without any outside confirmation declared victory in Pennsylvania. We are confident in our pathway. We are confident in our math. We said all along that we are viewing some of these races as math equations, Miller added. And if we count all legal ballots, the president wins. This kind of confidence has to come from somewhere. Either the campaign really does have the best data, necessarily much better data than Fox News and the Associated Press, which both called Arizona and Michigan for former Vice President Joe Biden, or campaign staffers are bluffing. Regardless, they're working for a president who refuses to lose, let alone concede. Trump has already exceeded expectations by holding most of the states he carried 4 years ago and winning over more new non-white voters, and he quickly declared victory at the White House early Wednesday evening. But the president could not stop a flood of late-counted mail-in ballots from slowly eroding his lead throughout the day on Wednesday. And so he sent his legal team to war as he promised he would. The campaign filed suits in Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, demanding Republican observers be given better access to witness ballots being counted and processed. In Wisconsin, shortly after the AP declared Biden the winner by roughly 20,500 votes, Trump campaign manager Bill Stepien announced, "The president is well within the threshold to request a recount, and we will immediately do so." The move comes even though conservatives in that state warn that recounts rarely shift more than a couple hundred votes in a trailing candidate's direction. In Georgia, President Trump and the Georgia Republican Party have filed suit to require all Georgia counties to separate any and all late arriving ballots from all legally cast ballots to ensure a free, fair election in which only legal, valid ballots count. Deputy Campaign Manager Justin Clark announced a few hours later, alleging incorrect counting in Chatham County. Bad things are happening in Pennsylvania. Democrats are scheming to disenfranchise and dilute Republican votes. President Trump and his team are fighting to put a stop to it, Clark said in another statement, announcing even more legal action. The campaign is moving to intervene in an existing Supreme Court case regarding the extension of the state's mail-in ballot deadline, while also seeking an injunction to stop Democrats from allegedly hiding, quote unquote, ballot processing from Republican observers. All of it was more evidence of how both campaigns had transformed into legal enemies overnight. For its part, the Trump team has been prepping for a drawn-out fight since at least this summer. A senior campaign official told Real Clear Politics in July that if there were any contested election results, Trump's camp would still have 2.5 months to get it figured out. A delay like that would make the 2000 recount drama in Florida seem tame. The participants were certainly more reserved 2 decades ago, and neither has social media. Trump does. He made the most of it Wednesday, tweeting a dozen times, mostly allegations that his opponents were trying to gain an unfair advantage in one way or another. Twitter censored 3 of his 13 tweets. Elsewhere, his supporters' anger reached a fever pitch. One man wearing a beer, barbecue, and freedom t-shirt interrupted a Nevada news conference by yelling that the Biden crime family is stealing this election. A prominent ally of the White House said that conservatives prefer the bare-knuckle populist to pass mild Republican nominees eager to avoid conflict. The George McCain Romney is in a hurry to give Democrats a tour of the White House. Trump won't settle for anything less than a fight, the allies said, explaining the president's mindset. They want one and they won't accept an unchallenged defeat, especially after being repeatedly told that Trump would lose in a landslide, that Trump would cost Republicans control of the Senate, and that Trump would spell the end of the party. Both sides are eager to call the election, even at the risk of incidental hypocrisy. After Democrats condemned Trump for prematurely declaring victory, a Biden campaign advisor did the same thing just 8 hours later. "We're winning the election," Bob Bauer told reporters at a Wednesday press conference. "We won the election and we're going to defend that election." The former vice president all but did the same thing later in the afternoon. "It's clear that we're winning enough states to reach 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency," he said as running mate Kamala Harris stood nearby. "I'm not here to declare that we won, but I'm here to report that when the count is finished, we believe we will be the winners. Trump believes as much, or at the very least refuses to be the loser." And now the 2000 race lasted until about mid-December and went to the Supreme Court. As the article said, there are roughly about 2.5 months left until Inauguration Day. So we shall definitely see just what will happen. And both Senate and House return to session on November 9. So things are getting very tight. And hopefully we'll have time to heal. And how do we do that? Well, there's this article. It's rather long, so I might summarize it. This from Deseret News. How we heal after a contentious election. The voting may be over, but the issues and partisan resentments that divided Americans for the past 4 years will likely survive the election and ensuing court battles that could determine who is the next president. This leaves a battle-weary nation with a dilemma. How do we heal? On the one hand, the division so evident on the map, the wide swath of red in the country's midsection and south, the blue on the coast, seem unfixable. Memes were circulating on social media Wednesday that if you voted for Donald Trump or for Joe Biden, we can't be friends. But the nation has recovered from worse wounds before, historians point out, most notably in the aftermath of the Civil War, when Americans had to stop thinking of each other as us versus them, North versus South, blue Confederacy versus Union. We were blue or gray then, now we're red or blue. And it goes on to say that the that that instead of being mired in the muck, America has clawed its way back by becoming less of an I society and more focused on we. And the we versus I curve. This isn't the first time that Putnam pinpointed an American problem and proposed ways to fix it. He explored the decline of community, social capital, and civic engagement in his 2000 book, Bowling Alone, and the need to rebuild those facets of democracy. And it says, while looking at where America was 125 years ago in 4 areas, economics, politics, society, and culture, he found sterling resemblance, inequality, political polarization, social dislocation, and cultural narcissism prevailed, all accompanied as they are now by unprecedented technological advances, prosperity, and material well-being, he wrote, to track the country's advancements or failures in each of those 4 areas over the past 125 years. He created charts and found a pattern that he found breathtaking. In each case of cultural relevance, on topics as diverse as income inequality, the cultural salience of responsibilities versus rights, and cross-party collaboration in Congress. The trend line is an inverted U. And it goes on to say that while Garrett is a fan of the progressive era and its policies, she wasn't. She said it wasn't America's political leadership that was responsible for the upswing, but ordinary citizens wanting change. For example, Teddy Roosevelt did not create but capitalize on an issues-based movement that had begun decades before, she said, and the social gospel movement, which introduced Christian ethics to social problems, was a cultural response to social Darwinism and a creed of survival of the fittest. And it says invite people back. Tuesday's results made clear that the 2016 election wasn't an anomaly. A lot of Americans are more concerned about me than about we. U.S. Senator-elect John Hickenlooper, Democrat Colorado, said Wednesday morning on MSNBC. As co-executive director of the Boston nonprofit Essential Partners, which deals in conflict resolution and trust building, John Saroof is talking a lot about healing these days and warning of what is lost if America doesn't do the hard work of repairing itself. If we divided ourselves in half, which statistically we sort of have, and tomorrow we stay in these camps as a country, we're only half of ourselves, and we're missing the richness of each other, of our regional diversity, our religious diversity, our ethnic diversity. We've lopped off half of who we are from each other, so we've said. And it goes on to say that in the Detroit Free Press, best-selling author Mitch Albom wrote that no matter who wins, the election means nothing if Americans don't do the hard work of repairing relationships and begin to treat each other better. We've all been behaving badly. I don't mean every single American citizen, but I do mean wide swaths of us in all states and all walks of American life, where public life, politics, media, businesses, establishment. Wrote Albom, the author of Tuesdays with Morrie. We dog each other, we point fingers, we fight over candidates, judges, medical experts, masks. Almost always these days, exaggeration is chosen over understatement, anger over calm, mean over kind. We have more than taken sides in America. We have tunneled most, Album said. And the truth is, our future won't be determined by who we choose to lead us this week. It will be determined by how we act after we do. And it says, ultimately, it all comes down to choices. No matter what the outcome of this election, ultimately what matters most is what we do locally, how we respond personally. That's the only place real challenge will take hold. And it's true. I mean, we do need to reconcile and come together. I mean, I know that things have gotten real dicey in many ways over this coronavirus. I mean, people are frustrated, they're wanting to get out and do a lot more. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The past 2 days have been hectic, and the next days, weeks, and possibly even months will be even more hectic. But I will be here to bring you more, but to calm you down, and possibly to keep you abreast as to what's happening. We are 3 days past the election. The votes are still being counted, and there's a lot of voter fraud going on. Got this from the Daily Signal. It says, is voter fraud afoot? A look at 7 claims. As might be expected during the undecided presidential contest between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, pundits and typical voters alike are voicing more concerns about voter fraud and unfair election practices. Already, numerous internet rumors have been proven wrong or lack evidence. That doesn't mean every assertion will prove to be without merit, however. Conversely, some legitimate questions about ballot counting have enough evidence behind them to support litigation. That doesn't mean such questions won't ultimately have satisfactory answers. Here's a sampling, based on what currently is known, of 7 claims in the post-election chaos. Number 1, Wisconsin votes versus registered voters. One popular claim circulating on social media and at least one viral email goes like this. Wisconsin magically now has more votes than registered voters. That essentially is a quote-unquote fake claim, said J. Christian Adams, president of the conservative-leaning election integrity watchdog group Public Interest Legal Foundation. Wisconsin has same-day voter registration, so you're obviously going to have more voters than registered voters, Adams told the Daily Signal. Adams noted that by Thursday afternoon, he had gotten at least 20 emails calling for investigations into bogus rumors floating on the internet. FactCheck.org determined that the number of registered voters as of November 1 actually exceeded the actual voters November 3 by 388,000. Number 2, no Sharpies in Arizona? An example of a legitimate problem is in Maricopa County, Arizona, Adams said, where 11 voters are suing the county for not, quote-unquote, curing their vote, meaning not providing a new ballot when their ballot is somehow spoiled. The lead client in this case, Lori Aguilera, represented by the Public Interest Legal Foundation, is asking a court to vindicate her voting rights. Aguilera is joined by 10 unnamed plaintiffs, dubbed Does 1 through 9. The lawsuit asks the court to order that election officials identify and correct all ballots that were denied because poll workers had required voters to use Sharpie markers in filling out ballots. Aguilera was issued a Sharpie marker per ballot on election day, according to the lawsuit. That's despite established state guidance that felt tip writing utensils should not be used. Aguilera said she became alarmed when she noticed ink bleeding to the other side of the ballot. According to the lawsuit, election officials instructed her to feed her ballot through the counting machine. When the machine failed to accept her ballot, the attending poll worker canceled the ballot, and Aguilera's request for a replacement ballot was denied, according to the lawsuit. These voters were denied the right to vote, Arizona election officials allegedly were part of the problem, and denial of the right to vote should not occur because of failures in the process of casting a ballot, Adams said in a public statement. The suit asks that ballots denied because of the supplied Sharpies be identified and allowed to be cured, that voters who were given felt tip markers be given the chance to be present to observe the handling and adjudication of their ballots, and that the court order their votes to be tabulated. Maricopa County officials pushed back, saying that Sharpies in fact may be used, according to an election day video that setting could not be through ballots. Maricopa County Elections Department tweeted out, "Did you know we use Sharpies in the vote centers so the ink doesn't smudge as ballots are counted on site? New offset columns on the ballots means bleed through won't impact your vote. Find a location before the polls close tonight at 7 p.m. today at," and there is a link to the Maricopa County Elections Department site. Number 3, Wisconsin ballot dump. Another claim about Wisconsin is that someone discovered more than 112,000 ballots marked for Biden between 3:30 and 4:30 a.m. Monday morning, or Wednesday morning rather. The left-leaning PolitiFact identified a Facebook post as being the source of this rumor, which the social media site flagged. PolitiFact marked this claim quote-unquote false, quoting Reed Magny, a spokesman for the Wisconsin Elections Commission, as saying, "Absolutely no ballots were single quote-unquote found." Magny added, "All of the election results that were reported in the early morning hours of Wednesday were valid ballots that were received by 8 p.m. on election day, according to the law. Aside from a social media and a blog post, no other Republican or conservative figures have made a case for this claim." Number 4, who's counting in Michigan? A lawsuit filed Wednesday in Detroit asserts that Democrat observers are reviewing thousands of spoiled ballots without a Republican observer present, as required by law. About 100 counting groups operating in Wayne County determined that ballots rejected by voting machines had to be reviewed. State law allows a Democrat and Republican election observer to review each ineligible ballot and make a mutual determination of the voter's intent. However, several witnesses alleged that only Democrat voters were correcting such ballots in violation of state law, the lawsuit says. The law in Michigan requires Republican and Democrat observers. Phil Klein, a former Kansas Attorney General who now directs the Amistad Project and represents the plaintiffs in this case, told the Daily Signal. Klein said every ballot could be perfectly legitimate, but the public needs to have confidence in the process, and so far, Wayne County has not been transparent. The lawsuit is only asking to open the record to the public. We need to know how the votes are being counted, Klein said. We know they're violating state law. That makes fraud easier. The suit calls for officials to quarantine the ballots until representatives of both parties have evaluated them. Biden supporters assert that the charge of no Republican observers is quote unfounded. Number 5, 138,000 for Biden, 0 for Trump. Another claim stated that Michigan at one point gained 138,339 ballots, all marked for Biden and none for Trump. This didn't require hostile fact-checking. The person who first made the assertion admits that it's false. The Detroit Free Press reported that this rumor began when Matt McCoyak, chairman of Texas's Travis County Republican Party, first tweeted that Biden received 100% of newly counted votes. An attachment showed 2 election maps, but McCoyak deleted the tweet and posted another tweet saying, "I have now learned that the Michigan update reference was a typo in one county." This tweet was taken and shared honestly. "I have learned the Michigan update reference was a typo in one county. I have deleted the original tweet," said Mac McCoyak on Twitter. "It's nearly impossible for such a thing to happen anywhere," said Hans von Spakovsky, manager of the Election Law Reform Initiative at the Heritage Foundation. There are a lot of stories and rumors that turn out not to be true," von Spakovsky told the Daily Signal. "If it was true that tens of thousands of votes appeared and every single one was for one candidate, that would of course raise grave suspicions. particularly this year when even Black and Hispanic voters supported Trump in surprisingly high numbers. Number 6. Huge Biden flip of Trump County. In 2016, Trump won 62% of the vote in Antrim County, Michigan, in his race against Democrat Hillary Clinton. Yet when the county tabulated votes this week, Biden reportedly beat Trump by 3,000 votes. Republicans at the local and national level, including American Conservative Union President Matt Schlapp, flagged this development as unusual. The questions got resolved when Antrim County Clerk's office announced they would count the ballots manually. The county has about 24,000 residents. There is no way that we flip from 62% Trump in 2016 to upside down this time around, said State Representative Tristan Kohler, a Republican, according to Interlochen Public Radio. Number 7, dead voters. The Public Interest Legal Foundation also filed a lawsuit against the state of Pennsylvania for failing to maintain and update voter rolls after finding 21,000 apparently deceased voters still on the rolls. That does not mean anyone was falsely voting under the names. However, critics have said unclean voter rolls present the opportunity for fraud. The lawsuit in Pennsylvania states, as of October 7, 2020, at least 9,212 registrants have been dead for at least 5 years. At least 1,990 registrants have been dead for at least 10 years. And at least 197 registrants had been dead for at least 20 years. Pennsylvania still left the names of more than 21,000 dead individuals on the voter rolls, less than a month before one of the most consequential general elections for official office holders in many years. Now, those 7 examples there is just indicative of some of the accusations. I mean, I remember back in 2000 here, there was the classic butterfly ballot when people who voted for Buchanan, or who wanted to vote for Buchanan and punched the hole next to Buchanan's name, actually went to Gore, and sometimes even vice versa. So luckily, there is no example of fraud here in Florida. So we may have vanquished the ghost of the 2020 or the ghost of the 2000 election. However, that does not mean that there is not voter fraud out there. So head on a swivel with that. And from the Washington Free Beacon, it says that there is a stalemate in 2020. The polls were wrong. The blue wave was no tsunami. The Democrat majority did not fully emerge. Parts of the coalition of the ascendant drifted to the right. For a generation, American politics have been closely and bitterly divided up between the parties. There has been high turnover in office and frequent shifts in power. Majorities are unstable. No victory is permanent. No realignment durable. The stalemate goes on. If Joe Biden becomes president, he is more likely than not to take the office with the Republicans in control of the Senate. That hasn't happened in 116 years. He will certainly take office with a reduced House majority. The Democrats have a net loss of 6 seats at the time of writing. 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are Republican appointees. The partisan breakdown of state legislatures and governors' mansions will resemble almost precisely the pre-election status quo. It's a good thing Biden campaign is someone willing to work across the aisle. He'll have no other choice. Now, if Trump wins a second term, practically nothing will have changed in American politics, except that both Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell will have fewer votes to work with. The country remains split. The New York Times exit poll says 37% of voters were Democrats and 35% Republicans, with 28% identifying as independents or something else. The Fox News AP voter analysis pushed leaners toward one party over another. it says that 47% of voters were Republican or lean Republican, and 48% were Democrats or lean Democrat. Now, only 24% of voters in the exit poll identified as liberal. The rest said they were moderate, 40%, or conservative, 37%. The Fox News voter analysis has similar results, with a slightly higher percentage of liberals, 30%, and a lower percentage of moderates, 33%. Conservatives were at 38%. The sorting of parties by race, education, marital status, and religious practice has polarized our elites and made politics heated, noisy, and apocalyptic. Every election is billed as the most important in our lifetimes, the potential end of democracy and our ways of life. For all the fire and fury online and on cable news, however, elections continue to be decided in the middle. Just look at the suburbs where a lot of those moderates and independents live. They backed Bush in 2004, then went for Obama in 2008. 2 years later, repelled by Obamacare, Republicans won 56% of the suburbs and 56% of independents. Obama won re-election in 2012 by erasing those margins. The electorate in 2014, however, looked almost exactly like it did in 2010. And in 2016, Trump won the suburbs by 5 points and independents by 6. By the way, he lost moderates by 11. Now, according to the 2020 exit polls, Trump lost the suburbs by 3, independents by 14, that's a 20-point swing, and moderates by 31. In the Fox voter analysis, Trump lost suburbs by 10%, independents by 14 points, and moderates by 25 points. Both campaigns can turn out their supporters, but the Trump campaign assumed its base will be enough to win. It looks like they were wrong. If Trump loses, it'll be because the voters in the middle grew tired of his antics. The public assessment of Trump's actions was filtered through its distaste for his comportment, rhetoric, and behavior, and Trump's personality often overshadowed or undermined the process of the progress of his own administration. These dramatic cell phones become the most obvious and most harmful during the coronavirus pandemic. The elected officials who demonstrated steadiness, compassion, and concern these past 8 months have seen their job approval numbers rise no matter the actual status of their communities. Trump's scattershot response prevented him from building on the slight uptick in support that he enjoyed last March. The voters who said the coronavirus was their most important issue went for Biden overwhelmingly. This rejection of Trump was personal. It did not extend to the entire Republican Party. Several GOP senators ran ahead of him. The gains in the House speak for themselves. At the moment, the only governor's mansion to flip is Montana's. It's a Republican pickup. Voters rejected a graduated income tax in Illinois and affirmative action in California. Even if Democrats sweep the 2 Georgia Senate runoffs and Chuck Schumer gets to be majority leader, thanks to Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote, the chances now that he will abolish the filibuster, pack the court, and grant statehood to Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. are nil. The Democrats dreamed of legislating the GOP out of existence. That's not going to happen. That's why they're so remorse about those results. The Republican challenge today is a mirror image of the party's dilemma after 2012. Then the GOP needed to retain its support in the suburbs while boosting support among whites without college degrees. Now it needs to retain its support among whites without college degrees while boosting support in the suburbs. And it needs to solidify its gains among black males and Hispanic voters who responded to policies aimed at tight labor markets and economic empowerment. It's a tall order, but as always, the Republicans' best allies will be Democrats, who, like all winners, will interpret an electoral victory as an ideological mandate. Outreach is inevitable, and so is a backlash. The vote counting isn't over, but the GOP comeback has already begun. And it looks like in 2022, things might be shaping up the Republicans' way. I'm going to look into that and hopefully give you an answer on that next week or later on down the road. But, you know, in all this going back, Trump is unveiling Democrat efforts And an election steal. Got this article from Front Page Mag. It's a long article, so I'll highlight a little bit of it. The election 2020 saga continues to unfold. Joe Biden has been closing in on the 270 electoral votes. He needs to become the 46th president of the United States. But as Yogi Berra once famously said, it ain't over till it's over. Active vote counting is continuing in key battleground states such as Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. However, the next act of the 2020 election drama is just beginning, with lawsuits followed by the Trump campaign challenging the legal validity of the voting and counting procedures used in various states. Meanwhile, leftists who don't want to wait for the election drama's denouement have already started rioting, demanding that every vote be counted. Those who believe in the rule of law are demanding peacefully that every lawful vote be counted in accordance to statutes passed by the state legislatures and with the Constitution. Joe Biden appeared before reporters on Thursday afternoon to urge Americans to remain calm while the vote counting continues. He declared, however, that he and Kamala Harris have no doubt that after votes are counted, they will be declared the winners. President Trump subsequently addressed the media from the White House briefing room. He showed no signs of backing down in his claims that he is the legitimate winner of the election. The president said he will fight in the courts against what he called a stolen election. He also blamed false suppression polls for attempting to discourage his own supporters from bothering to vote. They thought there was going to be a blue wave. That was false. It was done for suppression reasons, but instead there was a big red wave. Article goes on to say that some media outlets, including Fox News, have caught Arizona with its 11 electoral votes for Joe Biden. They will put Biden within 6 electoral votes of securing the 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. Nevada, where Biden is ahead in the popular vote, just happens to have the 6 electoral votes that will put Biden over the top. But this assumes that Biden turns out to be the definitive winner in Arizona, which the Trump campaign strongly believes will not be the case. And the article continues that if, as expected, the major media outlets decide sometime during the next several days to call the presidential election for Joe Biden, the fight will still not be over. President Trump has no intention of bowing out until he has had his full day in court. Stay tuned as the 2020 election drama continues. And that is so true, and that goes right into what John Yoo says over on Fox News. Trump-Biden presidential race could be decided by Pennsylvania case before Supreme Court. With the presidential election still undecided, President Trump's campaign has launched a flurry of lawsuits in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, and Georgia. The suits raise a range of claims. These include the exclusion of observers from vote counting rooms, voting by non-residents, and even the counting of votes listed as being cast by people who have died. But the case that could decide it all started weeks ago and is currently waiting at the U.S. Supreme Court. The Bulow case involves a decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court regarding how late mail-in ballots can be counted in that state. If the Supreme Court takes up this case and the presidential election hinges on the result of the vote in Pennsylvania, the High Court could determine who is president. And it's another long article, but it goes on to say that the Constitution gave state legislatures the exclusive authority to regulate the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives. Now, while Congress can overrule the choices of the state legislatures, state courts cannot. This is a crucial point. State legislatures set the deadlines, determine the validity of ballots, and the manner of counting the votes. The system can handle any normal election, but the election this week was no normal election. The COVID-19 pandemic forced some states to adopt large-scale mail-in balloting for the first time. Pennsylvania, for example, had 266,000 mail-in ballots in 2016, but 2.5 million this year. Most states have never mounted such a massive mail-in and counting effort before. And it says if President Trump is reelected, he will have won the Electoral College but lost a popular vote for 2 elections in a row. Gone are the days when the television networks and other news organizations could call the presidential election in the early evening because of the projected popular vote alone. In this context, the litigation in Pennsylvania can make all the difference. If that state's 20 electoral votes are needed to determine whether President Trump or former Vice President Joe Biden wins the election, and Trump and Biden are within a single point of each other in the popular vote in Pennsylvania, the candidate winning the state's 20 electoral votes remains undetermined. And it says if the U.S. Constitution directly grants those powers to the legislature of Pennsylvania, state courts have no authority to alter state election law for federal office, including the presidency. Now, as a result, the U.S. Supreme Court could strike down the extension of the Pennsylvania deadline to accept ballots until Friday and order the state to reject any ballots that are arrived after Election Day on Tuesday. This is not some constitutional flight of fancy. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito has already made clear his view that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has violated the U.S. Constitution by allowing mail-in ballots to be accepted until Friday. And the article goes on to say that Justice Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation to the Supreme Court, however, could append Roberts' carefully laid plans, which he probably fears a rerun of Bush v. Gore. And Barrett has not yet joined the court when Roberts prevented the court from accelerating consideration of Bachweier. The case still remains on the Supreme Court docket, neither rejected nor accepted for review. If Barrett joins the other 4 conservative justices, who share her originalist approach to constitutional interpretation, then Roberts could not stop the Supreme Court from intervening in Pennsylvania or from deciding in favor of invalidating all mail-in ballots that came in after Election Day. President Trump, who came from the world of reality TV to the unreal world of politics, will then be hoping that Pennsylvania 2020 turns out to be a rerun of Florida 2000, allowing him to serve a second term. So things are really ramping up. You know, like I said, it's already day 3 after the election. So grab your favorite snack, grab your beverage. You know, things are bound to be real hairy, and I will be walking you through it as time goes on. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Mick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or 2 even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.